All right, in this video, we are going to be building one of our most popular builds. We're just going to be building a rustic looking bar. So we do have the plans available in the listing description below. There's a link to purchase the plans for this build. And in this particular build, we are building a 5-foot bar. And the plans do come with instructions for 4, 5, and 6-foot bars. With all the material layouts and so forth. So you have that. This bar, we're building a counter height bar. So we're building it 36 inches tall. It's actually going to be used as a checkout stand in a boutique. So that's what we're going to be building. Now, also with our plans, you do get all of our finished photos, all of our stage photos, our marketing video, our Facebook marketplace listing descriptions, so that you can take our pictures, get it posted in your local market, and say, hey, I can make this for you. And trust me, this is one project you will sell a lot of. Now, for the 5-foot version of the bar, I sell these for $250. And I think you could charge a little bit more in certain areas, but in my area, that seems like a fair price. And these don't really take a lot of material, and the material we're using is not very expensive. So over here, we have 22 pieces that are cut to 34.5 inches. So this is just a 6-foot dog-eared fence picket. And so those work out real well for a 3-foot tall bar, because you can get two verticals out of one stick. So here we have 11 fence pickets, and they're $2 a piece in my area right now. So you can kind of do the math there. We've got $24 invested in fence pickets, and then we have some 2x6 material. So it requires two 2x6s, which are $8 a piece. And we get one 52-inch piece, and then these pieces here are 34 3/4. Now we're going to rip this down to 1.5-inch sticks, so 1.5-inch wide sticks. So we're going to wind up with 6 of these. We're going to wind up with 3 of them, and 6 that are 12 7/8. And then we need one 2x4, 52 inches. Okay, so this is 52 inches, 34 3/4, 52 inches. 12 7/8. Okay, now we will need a few fence pickets for the top of our bar. We'll need a couple of fence pickets to make the shelf of the bar, and then there is a couple of more fence pickets that we'll need for some trim pieces. Okay, so I'll show you how all that goes together when we get there. So my first step I need to do a couple of things. I need to rip all of my 2x6s down to 1.5 inches, because that's going to be our framework. So I need to do that to all 3 of these lengths. And then on these here, I need to take 2 of them and rip 2.5 wide strips, because that's what we're going to be using for the trim pieces on the bar. And you'll kind of see how that works out. Actually, I say 2, but we actually need 4. So we need 4 pieces. We need 1 for each end, and then 2 for the front of the bar. Okay? So I'll go ahead and get that done, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so the first part of this assembly process is we have to make 3 panels, just like this. Except the front panel obviously is much larger. So these are 34 3/4 long. So we have one 12 7/8, top and bottom. And then from the inside here to the bottom of here, it's 15 inches. So you could just measure from here 16.5 inches. And then we'll put our horizontal piece there. So we need to make 2 of these assemblies, and then you'll have a similar assembly, but obviously it'll be much longer for the front of the bar. So I'll go ahead and get those made. Good idea to use our carpenter square, make sure everything's nice and square as we're building. So we'll go ahead and put those together. I use 4-inch screws. You could use 3.5-inch screws, 2.5-inch screws, whatever you got on hand. But I always like to have 4 and 3.5 on hand. So I'll carry on. I do recommend using the pilot countersink on the ends. I don't do it here in the middle, but on the ends I do, because it could have a tendency to split there. So good idea to pre-drill that first. So I'll go ahead and make my other 2 panels and we'll put them together and then we'll carry on. Okay, so we have gone ahead and put together all 3 panels, and this is what the large panel looks like. So the sides here are 34 3/4. Our intermediaries here are 52 inches. And of course we came up from that bottom edge up 16.5 and then put in our board. So when we measure up 16.5, it would be to the bottom of this horizontal piece. Okay, and then of course we double checked all the corners with our carpenter square just to make sure we're nice and square. So now we're going to switch over to 2.5-inch screws, and we are going to put our 2 sides on. So we'll go ahead and do that with 2.5-inch screws. Okay, so you can see we have our 2 sides on there with some 2.5-inch screws. I think I used, let's see, yeah, put 2 on this side, 2 on this side, and then I used 4-inch screws with my 2x4, 52 inches. Now what I did here is I just took my carpenter square and I just lined it up, made me a little mark there where to line this horizontal board up. And then over here, we're gonna put another one at the top. I kind of forgot about that. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna run 2 vertical that way. So we'll go ahead and get those cut. I'll probably just use some of this scrap here. And so I'll go ahead and make me one more 52-inch piece, put that at the top, and then we'll put a couple of 1.5 by 1.5 pieces just to be able to mount our top to something. So I'll go ahead and get that done and show you what that looks like. So there is our basic framework for our bar. You can see it comes together pretty quickly. So this is the back side, or what will become the front of the bar, and this will be the serving side. We could, on our 2x4s, we could rip them down to only 2.5 inches wide. Sometimes I will do that, and the only reason I would do that is it does give you a little bit more clearance on the shelving. But to me, for this particular application, it's not that big a deal. So these pieces here work out to be 14 3/8, and what I did to even this out is from the inside here came over 16 inches on the inside, and then came over 16 inches, and then this works out to be like 16.5 or something like that. It's just a little bit more than 16, but it's more or less all centered up. Okay, so now that we have all of that in place, we are ready to put on the skin of our bar. So we're gonna lay it what I would call face up. So the front of the bar is facing me. So we are gonna lay it down on the serving side. And then we will find the center of our bar, and we got 5 pickets going this way, and it should land perfectly. And then we have 5 pickets that way, and it should land perfectly. And then once we have those on, then we have 3 pieces, and that should be the perfect width going across this way as well. So we'll see if it all works out, but that's how it's supposed to work out. So we'll lay it down, we'll get our measurements to find center, and we'll install our first picket, and then we will continue on from there. Okay, so we have our boards in place. We placed 10 of them. Now, I will confess, I measured 27.5, but the problem with these pickets is they're not all a uniform width. So in my case, when I came across, I was overhanging just a little bit on both sides. So some of them are wider, some of them are narrower. That can cause that. So we just trimmed them up a little bit, probably maybe almost a ½ inch, not quite a ½ inch. Just trimmed them off right there as close as we could. Okay, we're going to put a piece of trim board in the corner, so even if it's off just a little bit, it's not a huge deal. All I did was just line those boards up along the bottom. Now, if you remember, our verticals were 34 3/4, whereas our boards were 34 1/2. So we're actually just a 1/4 inch shy up top. Okay, and that's just the way I like to do it. So there's no real reason for that. That's just the way I've always done it. So that's the way I do it. So I put staples in, 2 staples per board, all on the bottom, top. Use 1.5 inch narrow crown staples. I did use staples on that horizontal. Remember, we have that horizontal one going across there. We've got 1.5 inch staples going across there too. But I'm going to come back in with my pilot hole countersink, and next to each staple, I'm going to drill a hole for 1 5/8 screws. So we are going to permanently mount those with screws as well. We could have used glue if you want to. You can. I typically don't, but certainly you could if you wanted to. So now we're going to put the 3 boards on the side, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, so we now have our sides on, and I don't know, I'm going to have to go back to the computer, maybe double check some dimensions, because this is flush. So this board is flush to this one, and it should have equaled out to be exactly 3 boards, but it was about an inch short. So on both sides, obviously. So I just ripped a little strip, 1 inch strip. We're going to cover it with a piece of trim anyhow, so it's not a big deal. I'll have to go back to the computer and see why that didn't work out the way I had expected it to. And to be fair, because of the varying widths of the boards themselves, it's probably never gonna work out exactly anyhow. So not a big deal one way or the other. So now that we've got that taken care of, we are going to go ahead and put our trim pieces on the sides, on both sides, and then we will put the trim pieces on the front. So I will go ahead and get that done real quick. So I did forget a step here that we need to put in our screws. So I have done that across the top and bottom on the sides, and now we're going to cover that up with a piece of trim. So I will go ahead and put the trim boards on the 2 ends, and then I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll put the trim boards on the front, and then we'll have to put in our horizontal trim boards, and then all we have left is the top and the shelf. So we'll go ahead and get that done. Okay, so we have our side trim on and we have our front trim on. Again, we put our side trim on first. It's flush to the front of the bar, flush to our pieces there on top. So you can kind of see how that is right there at the corner. All flushed up. And then the top trim is flush with the side. So now we're going to use a full width fence picket, 5.5 inches wide, for top and bottom, and then one along that as well. But those we don't really, we'll just describe it. So we'll just put a piece of scrap up there, mark it with the pencil, and then cut it accordingly and fit it in there. We are applying our trim pieces with 1.5 inch narrow crown staples. We could add a little bit of glue there if we wanted to. This is going to be used indoors in a boutique. So when we're using it for indoors, I typically won't use glue. All right, so I'll go ahead and add those pieces and show you what that looks like. All right, so we have all of our trim boards in place. See on the sides here and on the front. And so the only thing that's left now is to make a top and make the shelves. So we'll set it up right, and I'll go over how we're going to make those shelves here a little bit. So here on the inside, what we're going to do is we're going to cut a shelf to length. Now this board is 52, and these are 1.5 inches. Okay, so that means 52 plus 3, because there's one on each side. That's going to give us 55. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this board, this shelf board, just a little bit shy of 55. So we'll do like 54 3/4, and that way it'll fit in there perfectly, left to right. But we will have to notch this first board. We will have to notch it. So obviously we have to notch it 3 by 1.5 inches to fit it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my first picket 54. Maybe we'll do 54 7/8 so it kind of fits snug. And then I am going to notch both corners 3 inches. Okay. And you might have to play with that a little bit, you know, to get it to fit exact. But we'll start out that way. 1.5 inches by 3 inches. See how that fits. Okay. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so I've got my board cut to 54 7/8, and you can see here we've come down 3 and came over 1.5 inches, and we are going to take the line on both sides here. So we've got our cordless Ryobi jigsaw. We'll go ahead and jigsaw that out and see how she fits. So you can see it fits in pretty good. I did cut it at 1/8 inch short, and there's a tiny little gap there. Now here you can see this board is more or less right up in that corner. So all that looks good. But on this side, you can see we're not quite to the corner. This way looks good, but we're not quite to the corner, and that's because there's a little bit of a gap there. Okay, so this board must have been bowed a little bit. And so what we'll do is we'll just take more off the depth so that does get pushed back into that corner properly. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that quick, and then it should fit like a glove. All right, so we have our shelf boards in place. Our middle board is just a 54 7/8, and then we did have to notch out our other board to make it fit. And so that is now taken care of. Now I will go back in with my pilot drill, make some pilot holes, put in some screws where the staples are just to secure that a little bit. And so now we can move on to the top, and that will have this one pretty well finished out. So our top, we're going to cut 4 pieces that are 60 inches long, and then put those 4 pieces together, and that will make up the top of our bar. Well, that's what it looks like when it's all staged up, ready to go. Now what we did here is we took 4 boards that are 60 inches long, and you can see here on the end, we took 1 fence picket, the full depth here, and attached it. Then I took a 2.5 inch fence picket along the front and back side there. And then I have 2 more fence pickets equally spaced, and that will hold all these boards flat with those extra boards in there. And then we use some 2.5 inch screws along our 1.5 by framing to hold our top to our base. Now I didn't actually apply the top yet, because just for the weight of it, sometimes I think it's easier to do that on site, because we are delivering this one, so it just makes it a little bit lighter. But that's what it looks like. I'll show you the back side here, of course. We know what that looks like. We've got our shelf in there. So it's all looking really good. So I don't know if they're gonna stain it or paint it or exactly how they're gonna finish it. They may do a logo on the front of the bar as well. But that's what it looks like. This will be a popular seller for you. So I hope you like this one. I hope you give it a try. Thanks for watching.